Hello and welcome back to McClaren Performance, which is kind of a holiday edition this time as I'm in my hotel room taking a break from the sunbeds and doing something which I think everybody wants to do, which is to have a beer and talk about Gareth Southgate. And the reason why I'm doing that is because while I've been away on a holiday, I've seen the results of the Nations League games. That is losing to Hungary and then draws against Germany and Italy as well. And with that, I've kind of seen the criticism that Gareth Southgate has had before kind of come back a little bit more again. And with that criticism, I think it's been a bit kind of simple, a bit plain. I'm not definitely listening to a video defending Gareth Southgate, but I think there is more to be said about what he's done with England and what he is doing. And a big question really of how they should be working with him moving forward, whether they should be working with him moving forward as well. So I kind of want to get into all of that today. The main criticisms that I'm seeing with Gareth Southgate, the ones that always crop up again, I guess kind of three things really. The first one is that he's not utilising the talented generation of players that he has at the moment. So for example, like Jack Grealish, he's never playing Jack Grealish and giving kind of vague reasons as to why that is. Another complaint that I've seen a lot of is that he's kind of an FA man, that he's really been a part of that establishment and he's by the books kind of with them, and with that, not really experimental. And the other is that kind of generally he's a bit of a boring guy, which is a weird criticism, but one that keeps coming up again, which I guess people want an exciting England manager, and they're not quite getting that in Gareth Southgate. So I kind of want to go into the history of Gareth Southgate at England and delve a bit more into those criticisms as well. And it's interesting really, where Southgate started off was back in 2011. So I've got it here. He was the FA's head of elite development. I saw an interview with him back in 2011, and then it was he wanted to help to implement plans for youth development, developing players, and along with that, developing coaches. And within that interview as well, he was talking about how passionate he is about England, but also passionate about developing young people. And to be fair, that's something that comes across now in his role as manager as well. He really does care about the players and their development, and he has that caring nature about him. However, he then left that role in about 2012, I think, and then after a few months out, came back as the under-21 manager back in 2013. And kind of interestingly, with him leaving, that's when Dan Ashworth came in, taking a similar role that Southgate had before. And those two together, along with other people, other staff within the FA, came up with the England DNA. And that was out in 2014. And it's really interesting to look at, because it is the long-term plan of how they're going to develop England into this, it's close to winning World Cup culture that we have now. So really this England DNA is this kind of set plan. And it's in 5 parts. So those 5 parts are who we are, how we play, what the future England player is, how we coach, and how we support. And within that, there is lots of detail. I find it so interesting that there's something set in stone that every single member of staff, every coach, every player can look at to know this is the environment, this is the culture of England. And I think it helps a lot to have that, to get all the players on board, all the coaches on board, and to have a vision just beyond winning tournaments. There are 2 real aspects of that I want to focus on, but the first one is the how we coach. And within that, they talk about training and playing, and they talk about the process of that being plan, do, review. And it just took me back to a comment that Southgate made after one of the Nations League games about, he's getting a lot of questions about how they're playing, why he's making this decision, that decision. And he said, we'll assess the game, we'll take lessons from it, and then we'll move forward. And that is exactly what the England DNA plan is. They plan for the game, they plan for the training session, they then execute that, do it the best as they can, and then afterwards they review. And that might sound really simple, but I think simple is great sometimes. Simple is great all the time. And within England, having that process for everything is great. But what you notice as well is that's a process happening within the England team, and it's also happening within all the age groups of the England setup. And I think that consistency is absolutely great. The other aspect of it is when they talk about who we are, and within that they have a set culture, and with that set values as well. And there's 4 values that they have within that. So that is pride, integrity, excellence and collaboration. And so they've kind of worked together, talked to staff, talked to players, talked to ex-England players, things like that. And they've come together with 4 words to encapsulate what England is and how they want to work. And that's such a great thing. I think it's something that I've been reading a book, and I'll get into it in a minute, from Owen Eastwood. And he has such a big thing about narrative. So the narrative of England and what England is and has been. And then from that, setting out the core values from that story, or those stories in their past. To have those 4 things, those 3 things that everybody can get on board with. So it's not just about winning tournaments, and there isn't so much pressure all the time from the media, but it's more about what is England and who we are, and then demonstrating that in every tournament that we play. What you really see there, though, is Gareth Southgate is a key figure in England's development and England's plans from 2011 to 2016. So in that 5-year period, he's mostly there and mostly developing the future of England. Obviously, when it comes to 2016, that's when he takes on the England manager role. When he does join as a permanent England manager, you see him carrying on the work that he'd done beforehand. So I've seen it when I've looked into it. He's hired so many sports psychologists, and I think maybe 3 or 4 over the past few years that he's been there, kind of carrying on exactly what he was doing beforehand. Like I mentioned, one of those was Owen Eastwood. And when he brought Owen Eastwood in, he was tasked with setting the values, not just for the whole England setup, but for the England dressing room, the first team England dressing room. And with that, he researched the badge of the 3 lions and kind of researched the meaning behind that, finding out that it's about leading, about taking care of others, about fearlessness, about ferocity, but also how they represented diversity and how that reflected the diversity within the England team as well. And so from that, he developed 3 core values which stay actually within the dressing room to this day. We don't know about them, but the whole idea is that we should be able to see what those values are just from watching them play and see it in the actions that they take on the pitch. But through Southgate's time there, we've really seen a development of England, say from 2011 to now. The attitude and the culture around England, the fearlessness that they now have, it's changed completely with him being there. So amongst all this criticism that he's getting, I think it's not really appreciated so much the role he's had throughout that time behind the scenes, coming forward later on, and then carrying that on even further. So let's look at those criticisms again, but look at it through the lens of the history that he's had within the FA. So first off, yeah, he's kind of a boring guy, but you could also say he's conservative and he's rational. Again, going back to that plan, do, review. I think managing tournaments, I think, is different to managing a league. I think when you're in a league, you can take risks and really go out there with the things you want to do. But I think in a tournament, you have to win every game. And so, say with the Nations League, I think that's the time when Southgate can kind of change things and maybe look at things differently and manipulate things and do that plan, do, review. But especially in the tournaments, I think it's very important to stick to the setup that you have and that you know, and then make slight changes based on the evidence that you see from the games that you play. Another one of those criticisms is that he's an FA man, that he's one of them. But I think that's more of a compliment, really. There is a cohesion and a consistency throughout the whole England structure, and he's been a part of that. I think it's a good thing that the first team collaborate and work well with the rest of the age groups, but also the FA as a whole. It needs to be cohesive, and it needs to be a team effort from everyone. And if Gareth Southgate can be the person that represents not just the players, but also well represent the coaches, but also represent well the people behind the FA, then that's great. And the other criticism, the last criticism, is that he's wasting a talented generation of players. But and it's possible to argue that, but I'd also argue that he helped develop those players. So really, I think he deserves that shot at leading them. But despite those criticisms, I think the main positive is that he's brought the culture and the identity back to England, which is something that managers before haven't been able to do. So I think he deserves a lot of praise for that, and he deserves mainly a shot at the World Cup. And that really leads to the main criticism that I can actually really get behind, which is that he hasn't won anything. So with the World Cup beforehand, we got to the semi-finals, and with the Euros getting to the finals and missing out against Italy, I think we have to be seeing that progress now going into the World Cup. So going into Qatar now, I think very much the minimum would be the semi-finals. Even then, that would be pushing it, I think. And the question after that is, do they carry on with him? And then how do they replace him as well? Because if it does come to the point where they have to replace Gareth Southgate, I think they have to keep, and they will keep, the England DNA in mind, that the set philosophy that they have. And I think they should be recruiting a manager going forward from Gareth Southgate that fits that model and kind of what people might not want to hear. I think a manager that fits also Gareth Southgate as well. If you're going to go out and get a Graham Potter, for example, you've got to see if he fits with the DNA of England and the FA, and that he can actually work within that and carry on the work of Gareth Southgate and add to that as well. The alternative to that is recruiting from within, which I think is also a great idea. That's what they've done with Gareth Southgate, and that's progressed us so far. There's lessons to be taken from the lower age groups as well that could be taken forward into the first team. And that might not be an exciting thing for fans to hear, but it's a smart, conservative, rational decision, which is something that England have been doing over the past few years, and look how well it's serving them. They just need that bit of edge. I think, and I've said it before, the hardest thing to do throughout the stage of developing a team is to then get that team to win something. The winning part is the most difficult part, and there's lots of questions around how do you actually get that to happen. I don't think we should be scrapping everything and then getting a manager that is completely opposite to Gareth Southgate. I think the work going forward, or the new people coming in, should add on to what we already have and develop and grow from what is already at England and at the FA at the moment. That's what will take us forward, and that's what will help us win tournaments. This is all hypothetical because Southgate still has a chance now to win the World Cup, and he might as well do that. You know, the Nations League, I think, whether we like it or not, I don't think players are that interested in playing it. I think they're exhausted. I think there's a lot of football going on, and I don't think you're going to see the real England team in those games. I think it's completely different when you then get into that tournament and the psychology of being within the tournament, such as the World Cup. That's when the true colours of the team will actually show itself. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Gareth Southgate and England and what's happening at the moment, and just adding my few thoughts to what I'm already hearing. Already no real conclusion from that. My only real conclusion is that I don't think we should be overreacting to games like the Nations League. The work within England and the work towards tournaments is going on behind the scenes over these Nations League games. I think now what they're going to do is go, close doors, assess the games, make those small few changes that they think they might need to make, or stick with what they've got, and then we'll see the results of that going into the World Cup. But I think right now Gareth Southgate and the team behind England are exactly what we need at the moment, until proven otherwise, because we could easily just get knocked out and then suddenly it's all change all over again. But hopefully England, the FA, us fans, we keep that consistency in ourselves, keep that consistency in our optimism and hope that we'll actually win it one day. But yeah, thank you for watching and listening as always, and I'll see you again next week.